what I really liked about it actually is that it reminded me of the other guys, the lion tuna part, because basically Alexei is actually Mark Wahlberg in a surprise turn.
It made me giggle. Like David Copperfield was so ridiculous. This book was so ridiculous. I think
I attempted to reread the entire Grand Inquisition, and holy shit, I couldn't get through it.
Let's go beyond the first page.
Welcome back, Second Pagers. This is Beyond the First Page podcast with siblings Phoebe, Isaac, and Phil. I'm Phoebe.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Isaac.
And today we are talking about The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And this is Club Meeting 19. How did I do on the pronunciation, Phil?
That was great. Just letting all of our listeners know this is our 14th time trying to record this podcast.
It's actually a miracle that we've made it to this moment.
If we are a bit irritable at the start, it's because we have no faith that we are going to finish.
Well, so just a really quick reminder for our listeners before we have our opener for the podcast. This is a book club podcast where we discuss major plot points and spoilers from throughout the book. In this case, it's supposed to be a murder mystery, or not a murder mystery, but like a courtroom style where you don't know the ending. So obviously that will be ruined for you in this podcast. So if you don't want that to be ruined for you, really recommend you go on or go get the book, read it, and then come on and listen to the podcast. Or maybe some of us might recommend you just Spark Note it and then come on and listen to the podcast. But we'll get into more on discussing that in a bit. Also, if you like this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spotify, follow us on Instagram, and give us a like. And if you like this podcast, give us a 5-star rating. And like Phil said, it's actually a miracle that we have made it to this moment because I just moved. Actually, it was Isaac's birthday on the 6th, so it just happened. So shout out to Isaac. He is 31, the dirty 31.
The dirty 31.
the new 26, he said. Yeah. So happy birthday to Isaac. I'm in the process of moving, which is always exciting. And Phil's just always busy.
And my life is just a train wreck. So
yeah. But well, I was going to talk to you. We do an opener for anyone who's new on the podcast just to get us into talking. And usually it's something about books. Today, I wasn't feeling wholly inspired, and I also just something has been on my mind that I'm like, this is a perfect opportunity to bring it up on the podcast, which is my inability for people who are not doing their job to tell them that they have to do their job when I am paying them to do it. So and actually, Isaac, maybe you can relate to this too, because I think you kind of have a similar situation in your life happening right now. And Phil, I know, is the exact opposite of this.
Yeah.
But we had movers. I know. We had movers come yesterday, and they kept asking me, where do you want this box? And I would tell them upstairs. So we have 2 flights of stairs you have to go up. And they were getting pissed off. So then I just started saying, it's fine. You can leave it in the living room. And now myself and my husband are literally having to lug all of our belongings up the stairs. And the whole time I'm just like, Phoebe, just tell them to do it. And I can't do it. And now there's so much more work. And I just am like, what the fuck is my problem?
It's a delayed gratitude type of thing, because the other problem with that is that when you are the person that tells the movers to move it upstairs, everyone else actually is like, you're a douchebag. Or like if I do it, if me and Marian are someplace and a waiter just refuses to bring her drink or refill her glass, and I'm like, hey, could you refill? Marin is like, that was really awkward for a second, and then she's like, I'm really glad you did that. So you just gotta wait until that second, then everyone around you is like, thank you so much for doing that.
Saying
but
that.
In the moment, everyone's like, wow, look at this guy.
I know, and I cannot. I'd rather just suffer forever than say one thing.
When I was home last, Dad picked me up from the airport, and we had to run some of Mom's errands on the way home. And one of Mom's errands was to return a watermelon was half eaten, and they did not have the rest of it. So it was just a picture of a watermelon. And Dad was like, yeah, I'm going to go do this. I'm like, I'm not going to go with you. I can't. I can't be part of this.
That is a fully true story.
I've ever heard in my life. Oh my gosh.
Did they return it? Did they take it back?
Yes, they did. Which is crazy.
Dude, that's so wild.
Yeah, but it's awesome. It's like
at the same time. She didn't want the watermelon.
Yeah.
I would never even think to try to return a watermelon.
They ate it. They ate the watermelon.
So that's it. So what was the reason that they returned it?
They said it was bad.
But they still ate it.
Wild childs.
Oh my god!
Or they ate half of it or something. I can't remember.
That's so funny.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I brought that conversation up then because we got a really good laugh about that, and that it leads nothing into the brother Karamazov.
Family ties. I feel like Alexei probably would just tell him to leave it by the door, whereas Dmitri would probably be like, "You can take it upstairs," and then be like, "Oh no, I want it downstairs."
Yeah, so. And Ivan would be, "Why is the man working for us? We got everyone should be carrying the boxes."
Correct. But then not carry the boxes himself, just sort of observe.
Yes, yeah. As he's sitting on the couch, like, smoking or something.
Right.
Yeah. That was a good convo. Glad I brought that up. And we can now talk about the Brothers K, as we will now familiarly call them. And
so that's actually a cool thing in the literature. That is, so my wife took the class on the Brothers Karamazov, and the top scholars do just go Brothers K. That's
Brothers K.
Actually,
that's
you
us.
just go Brothers. So if we're legit, we got to go Brothers K.
Okay.
All right, Isaac, give us the Brothers K in 60 seconds.
Alrighty. So the Brothers K is a deep dive into the lives of three brothers, Dmitri, Ivan, and Alexei, as well as their father, Fyodor Pavlovich. Many different themes of philosophy are explored as a way to give the reader more background on the characters, as well as the time period of Russia that the book takes place. The main plot of the book is driven by the love triangle between Dmitri, Fyodor Pavlovich, and Grushenka, a woman both of the men have fallen in love with, and the money that Dmitri believes his father owes him, 3,000 rubles, and that same sum of money that Dmitri has borrowed from his fiancée, Katerina. Dmitri is accused of killing his father when he is found with Grushenka on the same night that he has brutally beat Gregory, his father's servant. Ivan and Katerina, and to a lesser extent Alexei, have a plan for Dmitri to escape if he is deemed guilty of the crime. Ivan thinks he has done it, while Alexei does not believe he ever could have. On the eve of the trial, Fyodor Pavlovich's bastard son and now chef admits to Ivan that he is the one that killed their father, and it was Ivan that inspired him to do it. Ivan tells the court this the next day, but despite this evidence, Dmitri is convicted of the murder. Ivan falls very ill, and the reader is left with a plan in place to allow Dmitri to escape his sentence and run to America with Grushenka.
Yeah, I think like this book, and thank you, Isaac, for that very comprehensive summary. And I think this book, along with Beloved, is one, again, like people take this as a course in college. It is very in-depth. It was written over a period of years. The actual books were published over a period of years. So the book is a compilation of little books, and it was actually supposed to be even longer, I guess. And so I'm excited to talk about this with you guys because I think this is a great book for a book club where we're coming to the table basically saying there are things we most definitely did not understand what was going on. There's definitely themes we did not pick up on. And the first one that I am wondering about is, and we didn't talk about this ahead of time, but it just kind of, when I ended the book, who was the narrator?
Yeah, I think it's the devil.
Point.
Oh. Whoa.
I don't think so. I think that's a cool. It gave us the cool reaction, but for sure wrong.
I don't know. For sure wrong.
No. But I guess my main argument would be that he recognizes the most pious man as the obvious hero, and I don't think that the devil, unless you believe that Alexei was actually
The
a little
devil.
devil minion. Yeah.
So I don't think so, because the original intent, I listened to the afternote, and the original intent of the author was to make this a book about young boys and how they're, so I'll like give this away up front, I guess, then, and this will lead into our first topic. But I guess it was the sins of the father bleed into the sins of the younger sons, the younger generation, and then it's like it's a wheel that keeps happening because they're never given a chance, because they're raised by these people who are also sinners. Like, everyone's kind of a sinner, but it was supposed to be centered around the boys. So that kind of brings us to our first topic, which was, we wanted to each pick an excerpt from this because there was parts where we three had absolutely no idea, and there was more than just these three that we're going to talk about. But we'll set it up as describing it to the other two, and then we kind of talk about what we think is going on in the scene. And I think one of the things that came up when we were talking about this
Wait,
was,
Phoebe, before we loop back, I gotta hear Isaac's argument on why Satan is the narrator of this book.
no, yeah, definitely Isaac.
I think just so when Ivan has his conversation with his, with the devil, which is that like the premonition that he can only see, who's
Right.
like visited him. I just felt like that's when he was talking to him, that's when I thought that maybe the devil was narrating the entire thing, because the devil becomes this like personable, like he's not this like evil, like he's just this like gentleman that is hanging out with Ivan, that is, trying to pull out his viewpoints. And I had to do a little bit of research afterwards, but essentially Ivan's decides that he believes like the devil's viewpoints, which was like the socialist views of the movement at the time, essentially. Which is also why I thought this was like propaganda, but I guess the author was trying to say that that was the bad part, which I never really put that together.
He was being ironic.
Yeah, I needed the internet to put that, but I thought like he was the author the entire time was like putting down Christianity and raising up like socialism.
Yeah.
But I guess I also didn't think that though, because I never saw Alexei as like the hero, because I didn't really think he did anything. Which we can talk about. But yeah, so after that conversation with Ivan, I was like, okay, if you think back, the narrator has like a very intimate understanding of everything that was going on, but we talked about the viewpoints in a further podcast, but he wasn't necessarily like fully omniscient, because we weren't hearing the thoughts of people. We're only hearing the like spoken word, everyone, the dialogue of people. So, but he was in every single scenario. So it was kind of like, the devil could be in a lot of different places. He was viewing this, like the whole setting was something the devil, I think, would be very down for, all this chaos and, someone died. Yeah, he's messing with Ivan's head. Dmitri is also a little bit insane, so I'm sure he would love that. Alexei gets pulled from the monk thing, so I think maybe we talk about that, but
okay, so he gets pulled from the monastery.
Him getting like pulled away from Christianity a little bit, and that's not necessarily the devil, but the devil would be attracted to that, I think. So
yeah,
I like the argument.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, that you brought up a point though, Isaac, I wanted to say, and then we can jump back into what I had described earlier. But for anyone who is thinking about reading this book or has already read it, the characters have multiple different names based on, I think they're just in terms of endearment in Russian, so it's different iterations of their name. And because this is a translated book, obviously, and so in the hard copy book, they have a list of the characters and what they go by. And that actually leads in perfect to the scene that I wanted to describe for you guys, because it's right at the beginning. They're going into to see the elder Zosima, who was Alexei's mentor at the monastery. And both Ivan and his father, Fyodor, are going there to talk to the group of elders and other monks that are there. And they're starting to use interchangeable names. So that's the first hurdle that you're working through. And so you're already so confused about who is who. And then they're getting into this extremely philosophical discussion about church and state. And I think this idea gets flushed out throughout the book, but at the time, and also having just my background is of like barely understanding any kind of movement within Russia. Like I just don't, that's just not my cup of tea. And so they're having this discussion, and Fyodor, the father, is also then being extremely not ironic, but just a buffoon. I think the title of the chapter is literally called Buffoon. This is book 2, chapter 5, by the way, so early on in the book. And I just wanted to honestly hear your guys' thoughts about what was going through your head at the time. This would, for me as a reader, like Isaac will mention this probably, but this is a point where you're maybe stopping the book, in my opinion, because you're not understanding what's going on. It's the plot is not drawing you in. This conversation in my mind had nothing to do with the entire rest of the story, but maybe you guys have insight into that.
Yeah, I'll go first because I'm sure Phil has like an actual real answer. This is where I definitely, if like we weren't reading it, I would be like, okay, I cannot do this anymore. However, that being said, now that I finished the book, now you think back on this, and it was like kind of funny. Like
it was funny.
Like I'm able to laugh now. In the moment, I did not find it humorous at all. But because I know the whole plot, then it was like, okay, it's hilarious. And I know Phoebe had a problem with the narrator. This was the first time you got to hear the narrator go hee 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 as he's reading the ridiculous buffoonery of Fyodor Pavlovich. So I kind of like, to me, I think back on it and I chuckle. But to me, like the whole, I can't remember what the hell they were talking about. But it sort of introduced, this was your first like long engagement of Fyodor Pavlovich and his sons interacting. And they kind of talk about how he like always played the fool. You can see Dmitri kind of went that same way. So it's a little just bit of character development. You see, I believe Ivan was called to kind of mediate as like a mature person, and then Alexei was the person like setting it up because he was in the monastery, so he had like the connection to the priests.
Yeah.
So I think, to me, like I just kind of saw it as like a little bit of character development. I'm sure there's philosophy in there, but like I said, I can't remember what they talked about.
I actually didn't really get I actually agree with you, Isaac. I philosophically didn't get too much. What I got was, I think that it's important throughout the authenticity of like these arguments that he sets up throughout the book. If he's going to talk about like these deep topics, or even someone on a criminal charge, he needs to establish like the importance of a bad faith argument, I guess. I don't really believe this, but here's the argument. And I think that he does. And he just presents the father as this just guy who's just fucking with everybody. And he like does not win in this. Like Zosima is just like, cool, let's actually just talk about what's really happening. Like he does not budge. And the only person that budges, who's sort of presented also as a fool, is his friend, or not friend, but like frenemy, who just like flips out on him. And then they both end up leaving. Where you have sort of this, like, I think the author's trying to say that, like, okay, you can't be foolish, but you also can't just like suffer fools and let them get under your skin. And I think that's super important. So I do think actually, I think it was more of a character development thing and sort of setting the stage for how we should perceive the arguments in the rest of the book, where like we should take Ivan at face value. He's not just like he believes the stuff that he's saying whereas it's not just like, oh, this is an intellectually curious way to approach the subject. I did like how he did the inner thoughts of the father, because you did like really see where he's just like, let's see how I can stir the pot a little bit. Like, I'm gonna tell this story about this saint that I know is not true, and see if ever anyone like goes for it.
Wait, so in that scene, you do hear the inner thoughts of the dad?
Yeah.
From what I remember,
so that
yes.
ruins my devil as the narrator.
Oh yeah, true.
I think you guys are onto something. I think both that it's developing the characters, it's setting the stage for what's to come. I also think, to your point, Phil, of the author lending legitimacy to all of his claims throughout the book and his knowledge. It's also painting like a legitimacy of the time. Like, these are conversations that these people would have been having and caring about. And so I think that also just, I think overall this book to me was, I mean, it was very not far-fetched, but it just didn't feel real. But the characters felt real to me.
Yeah.
I think the little boy measuring himself, there was details that real people would have these thoughts and concerns, and their pettiness and their day-to-day was very realistic to me. So I think this scene is a great example of that too, and the inner thoughts like you're talking about as well.
I think maybe this is what you're trying to say, like knowing the history of like when this was supposed to take place. So I think this was supposed to take place in like the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s in Russia, something like that. I just looked up so all this kind of starts with the 3,000 rubles is like the big like inheritance thing.
Right.
That is equivalent to today's value of $405 US dollars.
That is actually hilarious.
That
is a great fact to look up.
Yeah.
That's actually super helpful too. Yeah, great thing to do, Isaac. I think that reading historically is super helpful to put that in perspective. I know in Tolstoy at least too, you often hear what separates the characters is their like annual income from being a lord.
But do you really? I mean, I do think that it is still a large sum of money, but I think it was more of the slight from his father. Like, he felt like he was owed something, and also then the love triangle.
Yeah, he was, but it was also like he wanted the
money.
He expected a certain way of life,
yeah.
and he needed that money to do it.
Right.
So he thought he was owed the way of life more than it wasn't the money. It's all tied together.
Yeah, it's a status. Yeah. No, that's interesting. Did you want to tell us yours, Phil?
My scene was basically when during the funeral, I just did not really understand the entire stinking of the body, and it was like I knew it was important, and I just missed it, and I really couldn't connect. So basically, to give everyone a background, when Father Zosima dies, sort of you have most of the town, besides like a couple of radicals, thinking that this guy's like a saint, and it's gonna be like something crazy is gonna happen at this funeral because he is a saint. And what usually the crazy thing that happens in the Catholic Church is that some part of the body doesn't decompose, and you have these reliquaries all across Europe now where it's like, this is this guy's tongue from 1500. It is wild that this didn't decompose. He must be a saint. And so they were sort of thinking about that, and they were hoping for something crazy at the funeral. What ended up happening instead was Zosima really starts stinking, like more than a regular body does. And so you get these like detractors that come in and is like, look at this guy, he's all high and mighty. And turns out he was like
Stinking.
Not the guy that you thought he was. And I was just like, I don't really get this because I sort of dug Zosima. He seemed like a really genuine dude, and was also, I thought he was like pushing Alexei to be the best guy he could be. So yeah, Isaac and Phoebe, please explain to me.
So I don't know that this is true, but again, I listened to the end and I'm trying to remember, I should have written it down, what exactly they said. I think something with Zosima was lost in translation for us, because in the Russian, or in the way that the narrator's describing it, is because I was like you, Phil, I thought he was like the best character. I actually thought the conversation with the devil at the end with Ivan was a mirror of Zosima's conversation when he was like reliving his whole life and he was like an angel or God, and then the devil conversation came. They kind of came at like the same time, like they bookended this book essentially to me. So I thought he was a very prolific and good character. He was supposed to have this like kind of skeevy connotation the whole time apparently, and they were saying that the part of the stinking was, and I think I'm missing a piece, but part of it was his whole mentor was someone who killed somebody. Remember, they were telling that story where the guy would meet with him every day, and he kind of like rose Zosima in the church. And then he admitted to Zosima he just cold blood killed someone, and then almost came back and killed Zosima. So there was like that whole thing that was kind of a rot in his faith essentially. And then I guess there was something about him having a lot of women, like, you know how he went to each of the women and they were coming to be consoled by him, and it was like the woman of faith, the woman not of faith. I guess there was some speculation around him being too familiar with these women. So that, I think, I don't know what the deeper meaning of that is, but there is some like kind of
That's super helpful because I don't think that came across in the English. Yeah.
There was some backstory about how he was supposed to be portrayed that I personally didn't feel. And maybe I misunderstood the ending notes, but that was definitely news to me. So I thought that was interesting. And I don't know that I can discern a deeper meaning other than just like you're saying that the rot was basically that everyone loved this guy, but actually he kind of sucked, or like maybe we all sin, so we all suck. I don't know. What do you think, Isaac?
Yeah, so I thought, again, I will preface this, which we had to look up on the internet, or I had to. Alexei is supposed to be the hero, and he is this like Christian monk, good person thing. So there's the
narrator says in the first chapter, Alexei
is the hero.
Well, yeah. Alexei is his hero, but I don't know that Alexei is supposed to be the hero either, because then
he said the hero of my story. So, but yes, I just wanted to say that's not like something you have to read into a little bit.
Okay, so
just
forgot that.
That's fine. Yeah. No, that's fine. I just wanted for the people
yeah, because Father Zosima was like Alexei's mentor or like idol, or not idol. That would be bad for the little good Christian boy. I guess mentor.
He was his mentor. Yeah.
Role model. Yeah. So then he dies, and then his body stinking pushes Alexei away. So that is kind of like the trigger that pushes Alexei from the church a little bit, and he decides not to become a monk, I believe, right? He sticks with that. He doesn't become a monk. Then he goes to his dad's friend, picks him up, and he's like, all right, let's go drink and hit up your dad's lover, because they go to Grushenka's house like right after that, right? Yeah. And then Grushenka is like, oh, Alexei, like she is kind of like teasing him and stuff. But anyway, back to this. I thought the stinking body was a trigger to push Alexei away, which is kind of why, like, I have this whole, like, I'm missing where he is promoting the author is promoting this like Christianity, like good way of living kind of thing. I am reading this book seeing he is making fun of Christianity. This is a jab at being like, oh, you saw all this saintly man? Yeah, he's rotting. The devil is won again. Like, this doesn't, all this stuff is ridiculous. They like make fun of the Jesuits and stuff. I read this all as a anti-religious thing.
I did a little bit. Well, go ahead, Phil.
Here's where I love your analysis of this. It does help put things into perspective for me, because I think you're right that maybe this was what pushed him away from the church. But I think where you're getting mixed, and where I disagree with you maybe, is that you're seeing this as pushing him away from the church. I'm seeing this as pushing him away from the monastery. And those two things are not equivalent. I think that Alexei serves Christianity in the real world, and that is actually maybe what Dostoevsky is making fun of a little bit about like how are you serving God when you're just with your 50 bros
Okay.
singing psalms all day?
Yeah.
Whereas like
So
actually
the
to serve
establishment
God,
of the church.
Right.
this
I could buy that, and that will play into mine. We'll talk about more, but I could buy that for sure. And I think I put those two things together in my reading of it because honestly, I saw Ivan as the hero of this book. Like I forgot that the narrator said Alexei is the hero, but
interesting.
I thought Ivan was the hero.
Hmm.
Or was
I
supposed
didn't
to be the
get
hero.
that.
I don't think any of them were heroes
The
necessarily,
heroes.
but
Yeah.
but I thought he was written as the person that you were supposed to be like, okay, that guy was right. Yeah.
So I didn't feel that, and I don't know that I have like a commentary on that. I didn't feel anyone was the hero, but your guys' point that we're talking about brings up the other thing I want to talk about. So before we talk about your scene, Isaac, I want to talk about this because I personally felt sometimes that it was definitely making fun of the church, but I think that was intentional, it sounds like. And then I think at other times it was extremely spiritual and uplifting as somebody who if somebody was a Christian, but I'm wondering if you aren't a Christian, what do you get from this book? And I just don't think someone who doesn't believe in God, I think they would put this book down. I think there is a lot of things that these characters are fully believing and living, that they think that God is real and like that you're getting forgiven of your sins. And yeah, I don't know if you guys felt like somebody who was an atheist would get something from this book.
I mean, I think I've already said I think they would be vindicated, but I'm reading it like completely different. So
Yeah.
I think personally, to get a preview on that, I think actually it could be read very much both ways. Marianne knows a ton about this book, so I asked her stuff, and I told you guys I wish I didn't ask her about Dostoevsky's religion at the beginning, because I think that I would have taken the Isaac track and just thought that he was an atheist arguing against the church.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you could actually take it both ways, but it definitely, once you make the decision whether or not that it's for or against the church, it's hard to see the other side for sure.
I mean, I don't know. I'm waffling though, because Isaac's bringing up a lot of good points that I do think he was making. That there's a large evidence that they were making fun of the church. But to me, when I was reading it, I felt like it was very faithful, and even outside of the the more deeper meanings of it, I felt that the characters themselves were saying things and doing things that they fully believed in God. No one in the book was not believing in God. And so
I mean, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what, so Phil, I think I've changed to Phil's like idea that it's the church as a establishment, as an organization, he is railing against. So you have to separate like religion and the church, or spirituality in the church.
Yeah.
Because this is a great segue. The Grand Inquisitor is a poem that Ivan wrote essentially about this, and it's I think it highlights this exactly, Phoebe. So I think you can say that they are all like super religious, or it is promoting this like idea of spirituality or religion, whereas in saying the establishment of the church is messed up and bad.
Right.
Which I think makes a lot of sense. So the Grand Inquisitor is a poem by Ivan that talks about Jesus. It comes back to earth during the Spanish Inquisition. So he shows up in Seville, Spain, and is arrested. He starts performing miracles again, and then is arrested. And then the cardinal for the he's called the Grand Inquisitor. He like comes and is like berating Jesus, and essentially saying like, you are no longer needed in religion. The church has got this. And like, we can now control people how we want them. We have all this, like, we can do what we want to do, and you're no longer needed for Christianity, essentially. Yeah. Which I think, like, I was unable as the reader in the moment to like separate kind of what we've been talking about, but really it separates it very well for you. And so Jesus stands there and again doesn't defend himself, and the Grand Inquisitor is all high and mighty, but openly tells the person that they're supposed to be like worship. The whole religion is based off, you're no longer needed. The church can do this, which like is,
valid.
So I think very true in a lot of ways, unfortunately. So I thought that was really cool. And I'm glad I went last because I don't think we're having a different conversation than I think we would have been having. And so I did a little digging on this. I attempted to reread the entire Grand Inquisition, and holy shit, I couldn't get through it. But
it's quite long.
Yeah.
I could not get through it.
But I got the gist. I got the spark notes of it. And I have to say for the listeners, like I had to do a lot of research to get to what I just told you. Like the first time I heard it, I was like, oh my God, another monologue. Like this is like needs to end.
Yeah.
And there's still 30 hours of this book left. Oh,
yeah.
God. But it is pretty cool once you do a little bit more digging in it. So I'm glad we're talking about it. Some other stuff that I read about it is that like, so this again highlights Ivan's views. So essentially he's saying that like, there is like the church's not good. And then he's essentially highlighting again the socialist views are the devil's views, and that Ivan is like fully committed to kind of like seeing that, and that's what he believes. And I think Phil said this too. Ivan is going to tell you. There's no like mincing words with him. He's going to tell you what he believes, and he's telling this to Alexei, and Alexei is like, "Well, brother, there's all these other things." But I believe that Alexei, and maybe if you guys remember, he kind of admits that like, okay, you could be right about the like church thing, but like Jesus is still the hero of, even in your own poem where you have written it to like say that religion is bad and it shouldn't exist and all this stuff, Jesus emerges as the hero still. So Alexei kind of like not throws it in his face, but is like, I'm not changing this. Like, I'll admit maybe the establishment has some problems, but you wrote this to put religion down, and you're a hero. The true hero Jesus. Of the religion still emerges. There's just a quote that kind of like highlights the entire thing that I thought was cool. So it is in this distinctive need of having a worship in common that is the chief suffering of every man, the chief concern of mankind from the beginning of times. It is for that universality of religious worship that people destroyed each other by sword. Creating gods unto themselves, they forthwith began appealing to each other. Abandon your deities, come bow down to ours, or death to ye in your idols. So that's kind of just like the church, gathering power and then feeling that they could turn Jesus
Christ.
Away.
Yeah. Right.
I think it was, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think that what I really liked about it actually is that it reminded me of the other guys, the lion tuna part, because basically Alexei is actually Mark Wahlberg in a surprise turn, and he brings this like, he's just like, hey, like Ivan, like, what's up, dude? Like, seems that you've really fallen away from God. Like, I was gonna talk trash on you out in the hallway, but like, I'm here to hear about your poem. And then Ivan just gives him this whole thing about how if he was a lion and he was a tuna, he would murder him. And then at the end, Alexei's like, good point. And then just dumps the coffee on him by kissing him. And then he wins. He wins. In that argument, Will Ferrell's the one that has hot burns down his body. Yes, he scored him with lions and tunas. But the kiss at the end is just like, the coup d'etat or whatever. He's like, well, damn, this is how you defeat this argument, by like, show love. Like, sure, you can kick me out of your religion, I will still kiss you at the end.
And it was ironic because Jesus kisses the cardinal after he's just like berating him about how they're unneeded, and Ivan goes, well, you got me.
Like, and that's like, I am dripping with hot coffee.
Well, I think overall I'm very pleasantly surprised by how much we all three were able to help each other get out of this book. And I think we kind of talked about everything we really wanted to. So I'd love to rate the book using our Michelin scale. And Phil, will you just quickly explain how we rate books on the podcast?
Yeah, so the Michelin scale is basically that 3 stars is we loved it, we would read it again. 2 stars is we liked it, we would recommend it to a friend. 1 star is we liked it, but probably not going to recommend it, stake our reputation on it or anything. And then 0 is just like this book was garbage. And I personally gave it 2 stars. I would not reread any Russian literature. I think it would be hard for me to do that. But I've already recommended this one to a friend, so by definition, 2 stars.
Yeah, I think I'm a 2 as well. I think I liked it. I found it very comical, and when I give my recommendation, I'll kind of draw that comparison. I just think the time period for me is hysterical. I love the way they communicate with each other. I love how dramatic they are. And I do think that the cadence for me was hard. I did not like how the plot would start to pick up. I think ultimately I was engaged in the plot, and then we would get into these philosophical discussions that really just I have no interest in thinking about or reading about. So for me, it was a 2. I would recommend it to a friend. I think part of this whole book club for me was trying to expose myself to different forms of literature. And so I had never read Russian literature before. I couldn't get through Anna Karenina, so I'll reattempt that now. I think I could get through it. So yeah, it was a 2 for me. Isaac, what about you?
Yeah, so I think I'm bumping mine up a little bit. I think I'm going to give it a 1.5.
Okay.
I have really enjoyed our conversation here. I think that this is a, like Phoebe mentioned in the beginning, like Marion took an entire semester to read this book and discuss it. Reading it in 2 weeks is maybe not the way to go. I don't necessarily think reading it on audiobook is the way to go because I never knew who the hell people were. Like until I was writing my notes for this podcast, I didn't know which one was Grushenka and which one was Katerina. I just kind of went with it, which is like, kind of a big part of the book. But there's just so many. Yeah. So I definitely wouldn't read it again. I would recommend it to someone only if I knew that they were gonna like put the time in and be doing maybe a book club thing. Like I would recommend it to someone who's like, hey, I need a book for a book club. We meet every month or every 2 months. I would say, okay, meet up and you guys can talk about this. Settle it.
Brothers K, read Brothers K.
Yeah. I obviously am like, I had the opposite take of like what it was supposed to be. Some things were missed for sure. But it always helps to talk about stuff afterwards, which is why you guys should to like stay engaged with the podcast, hit us up on the Instagram and Spotify and whatnot, because it increased my rating of it for sure. Yeah. Halfway through this book, I was like, I cannot wait for this book to be over. And I was happy when it was done, but now that we're talking about it, I'm glad I read it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the courtroom for me, I was wanting that to be over. It was so close to the end and I got nothing out of the whole. It literally, if you read the back, it's like this courtroom drama. Do not listen to that. That is not accurate.
Yeah, the plot thing is garbage. So off.
Yeah. I think, Isaac, I wanted to say that the other thing is, even though you said I got a different meaning from this, I mean, if again, when I listened to the end notes, even the critics across Russia couldn't figure out, like, this is a work of art, in my opinion, which is, I think, another reason why it was a 2 for me, is because it's up to interpretation, I think, a bit. And so I would hesitate to say you were wrong, because I think that's what you got from it. So I think the author's intent was kind of get what you get. I mean, he definitely had something he wanted the reader to take away, but I think what you're taking away isn't wrong necessarily. So I think we could go into, if you liked this book and you're looking for a recommendation, what would you recommend? So Phil, what would you recommend to people? if they liked the
Yeah.
Brothers K.
So if you liked the Brothers K, I mean, I think there's a lot of really easy ones. Like you get the Crime and Punishment, which is just another Dostoevsky. The any really Russian literature. I think The Trial by Franz Kafka is another one. That's just like philosophical fiction. And The Stranger by Albert Camus. Both of those are just philosophical fiction. I think the most interesting one though is Slaughterhouse Five that I would have. I actually love Slaughterhouse Five by Kurt Vonnegut, and it's very philosophical, but the plot is really really good. And it's like sci-fi actually, which is wild. It really good book.
I think
So
you
I think
recommended it, Phil, before.
I
Maybe,
have, yeah.
what was it too? I think it was
Catch
first book.
22, The Shadow of the Wind.
The
Yeah,
Shadow of the Wind. Yeah. Or I don't know, but you've recommended it before, so I should read that
yeah,
book.
it's a good one.
What would you recommend, Isaac, if you liked the Brothers
Um,
K?
So I was going to pull a page from Phil's book and just recommend the Gospel of Matthew, but I think
Dude, honestly, fire gospel. All right, Sermon on the Mount. Like, if you're to not ironically recommend the gospel, go for Matthew.
but a different book. I immediately. So at first I was thinking like this reads like a play. I don't know if they've turned this book into a play before, but I feel like someone with a talent for that kind of thing definitely could.
Yeah.
And then so any kind of like play that you read, I think you would enjoy if you enjoyed reading this one. The cadence of it was definitely
Like a play.
play-like for me.
Yeah.
And then also I just put the Odyssey, but not like a fun, retelling of the Odyssey, the Homer Odyssey,
Actual Odyssey.
in just in English. If you like this bad boy, so
Word for word, no, even really interpretation, just word for word. Like the sentences are backwards. Yeah.
You like to think about what the author is trying to tell you, what the hell is going on. Yeah,
this is the book for you. Yeah. I really like that you mentioned that about the play, Isaac. I completely agree. I had not identified that the whole time I was reading this, but I'm so happy you said that because I 100% agree. Mine was David Copperfield. I think just because it made me giggle, like David Copperfield was so ridiculous. This book was so ridiculous. I think yeah. Just the characters were like Dimitri and Fyodor both were just hysterical, and David Copperfield has some hysterical parts I've recommended on the podcast before. That's by Charles Dickens. If you like it, you should read David Copperfield. I just love David Copperfield. And I haven't read any Russian literature, so this is the closest thing I could think of to that. But yeah, what are we reading now, Phil? What have you been reading?
Yeah, I've been reading a lot. So The Alchemy of Masks and Mirrors by Curtis Craddock is got a really strong female protagonist. I liked it a lot. Unnatural Magic by C.M. Wagner was really good. LGBTQ fiction is, for me, very hit or miss because I think that sometimes the plot gets lost and there's just like too much sort of like it almost over invents gender and sexuality to make it not applicable to the current world because it's in a fantasy world and makes it really hard. This one was perfect. There was trolls, which were good. Like trolls were actually the leaders of the system and they were the leaders of the magical system, but they were very genderless and not like applicable to humans. And it was tough for humans, but it was cool because as the reader, you were a human feeling the same sort of like, what is gender to these trolls as the humans in the book. And so you were on the same pace as everybody. Cool. Very cool. And then the last one was Mageborn by Stephen Arion. I just finished the first one. There's 3, so I really liked those. But that one is definitely a cast of characters book. There's like 15, so would recommend listening to the first 2 hours uninterrupted, or you're going to be lost. So, yeah.
Cool. Wow, you've been really busy. What about you, Isaac? What have you been reading?
So I've been mostly reading Brothers K, but I finished it. And now on to Assassin's Quest, the last in the trilogy, the Farseer trilogy. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah.
Wow, that's been a little bit of time has gone by there, Isaac.
Well, I had to read both Van Gogh and Brothers K, so
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
it's taken me.
It's been a journey for us this summer. But well, I am just reading Brothers K, so I'll just say I've just finished that. But I think the next book that we're reading is definitely a breath of fresh air from that. Phil, you've said you've read it already and really enjoyed it. It's a short read. And it is The Backyard Bird Chronicles by Amy Tan. Isaac, would you just let our listeners know what we'll be talking about 2 weeks from now when we meet again?
Yes, The Backyard Bird Chronicles is a book that documents Amy Tan's observation of birds in her backyard over a period of years. The book is a chronicle of Tan's learning process as she observes and interacts with the birds and reflects on her emotions and questions about morality and mortality. And I've actually started this one as well. I would recommend either reading the hard copy so you can see the drawings or having access. I think Phil said he had access to the PDFs of the audiobook to look at her drawings because they're cool.
Yeah, and I think thanks for that plug. And I will say too, Phil, I'll share what you said. This sounds kind of weird if you're reading this description of what this book is about, but Phil really enjoyed it.
And I really hate books like this. Like these books are not my thing.
Yeah.
Little short essays about like how you feel about life sound awful to me.
Yeah. So that's cool. So it's good that you liked it then.
Yeah,
as the kids say, it's giving braiding for sweetgrass.
It's giving braiding for sweetgrass.
Which I like though. So
for Phil, it's giving braiding for sweetgrass. Cool. Well, that is all we have for this week. Great discussion, you guys. So happy we got this one off the ground. It was a big lift in every sense of the term. So, woohoo. And this is a bi-weekly reminder to call someone that you love, tell them that you love them, tell them about a good book. Hopefully you guys will be able to read The Backyard Bird Chronicles together and talk about it, which is our next book. And until we meet again, stay classy, second pagers. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
See you guys.